chapter 1. As you're turning there, not sure how I'm going to proceed here. We know that we're living, at least we're getting closer to the end of the days. I think we're in the end times, but that may be a matter of opinion. But nevertheless, we do know that we're getting closer to the end times. And as such, as I may mention earlier concerning the drug situation, the enemy is going to do everything that he can to keep people down, discourage them, dissuade them, keep them out of church. And we have to keep ourselves on guard. We have to keep ourselves prepared that we don't fall into that trap ourselves, that we aren't overtaken by the enemy. Don't pray for my throat. I want to touch on some things this morning in this message pertaining to that, but at the same time, I want us to pray. There's a group of people, and when I say group of people, I'm not talking about there's 4 or 5 over here, or 6 or 7 over here. Let's rephrase. There are people that just don't see the need to be in church every Sunday. For whatever reason. Maybe they were raised that way and were taught that they didn't have to be or didn't need to be. Or maybe they just don't see the need in their life. Whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. But we just need to keep those people in our prayers, whether we know their name or not. Just send up a prayer that God would impress upon them the need to be in God's house. In spiritual food, there's not one of us that misses a meal. I mean, we want to feed our spirit, our physical body. We don't want to miss those meals. Same way we shouldn't want to miss our spiritual meals. And all that part was just a little intro to today's lesson. I'm going to read the first 3 verses of chapter 1 of Nehemiah, but to be honest with you, I'm going to preach over the first 4 chapters. Give you some scriptures as we go along. If you haven't already read it, you can go home and read it after the service. But I do want to just lay a foundation here. Nehemiah chapter 1, starting with verse 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hachaliah. And it came to pass that in the month Chislev, in the 12th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hananiah, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. They said unto me, the remnant who are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. The walls of Jerusalem also are broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. Father, we ask your anointing upon reading of your word. Ask for your anointing upon your servant, that I'll present this message to people who stand in need of what you have to say to them. May we listen, may we take heed, and may we honor your word, Father, by obeying. We ask it in your name. Amen. Let me give you some quick background information so you'll be up to speed as to where we are in this study. The Israelites had left Egypt. They had wandered for 40 years. They had settled in the land of Canaan. The land had been divided among the tribes. Been there. The portions of the land had been divided. And the temple in Jerusalem had been built by King Solomon. And after Solomon's death, his sons, due to a power struggle, consisted of 10 of the 12 tribes. The southern kingdom, 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, of which Judah, the Messiah, would come from. So the southern kingdom had been carried away to Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. Because of idolatry, the people in Israel had become idolatrous. They were serving idols. They had desecrated the temple, and God had warned them that if they kept on, they would have to pay the consequences for that. So the consequences were that both the northern and the southern kingdom had been carried away into captivity. Judah was carried, as I said, into Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar, and the other 10 tribes were carried off into Assyria. Well, Babylon, who had carried off the southern kingdom, was then defeated by the Persians. Thus, the southern tribes of Judah became subjects of Persia under King Cyrus. Now, the Lord had spoken to Cyrus and had told him to let some of the people from Judah to return back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, which they did. So they returned, they rebuilt the temple. But that's as far as they got. They didn't rebuild any of the walls surrounding the city. They just rebuilt the temple in the middle of the city. So Nehemiah is a cupbearer here for the king. So when he discovers in those verses, his brothers come back and told you things aren't good, basically, in Jerusalem. So when he discovered that the walls and the gates had not been rebuilt, he prayed to God and had received permission from then King Artaxerxes to be able to return and rebuild the walls of the city. So that's a quick background, brings you up to the lesson today, the message today. Now the temple had been finished some 70 years earlier. So now Nehemiah would go, he would return, and he would rebuild the walls around the city. And we're told in the 6th chapter that he did that in only 52 days. Now Nehemiah faced some problems when rebuilding the walls. In fact, he faced 8 problems. Ridicule, wrath, discouragement, fear, internal strife, laziness, compromise, and lying promise. Now the 3rd verse that we read to you there in this 1st chapter. Jerusalem is in ruins. The temple's there, but the city itself is in ruins. And Jerusalem in ruins is a picture showing describing their danger and the despair that they're in. For us, that's a picture of a life that has lost its defenses against the attack from the enemy. I want you to think about this message more. I'm going to be talking about walls and I'm going to be talking about gates. Walls and gates. I want you to think about building walls or walls that are in disrepair, that have broken down, wall around our heart. Gates into our mind and into our hearts. They've been burned. They're in disrepair. So Jerusalem here is a picture of a life that has lost its ability to fight off defenses against an attack. Almost every day we're exposed to hurt. We're exposed to misery of people whose walls have been broken down. So the people were beaten down and discouraged as a result of the captivity of their fellow brethren. They had allowed the walls to fall in disrepair, and as a result, the city was open to more attacks. They lacked safety. They had given up. In fact, they had given up and thought they could handle it themselves. That's a widespread illusion today, and that is that we don't need God, I can handle it myself. Oftentimes we hear people say, well, I can handle it, I've got it. But the reality is we can't. We can't handle it. We think that we can function just fine without Him. But I think the book of Nehemiah would teach us that it's only with God's help can we actually change anything in our lives to be able to recover from ruins of the past and damage that's been done. But if you notice the description of Jerusalem, there says the people were in trouble. The walls of the city were broken down. The gates had been burned, and they were no longer usable, in fact. Now, if we take Jerusalem as a symbol of our own times, there are a lot of people that might fit into that description. You may look back on your life and you see where the walls have been broken down. There's no longer any ability to resist the attacks from the enemy. You know that if you have one little crack in a wall and you let one little enemy get in, it's kind of like a floodgate. A little bit of water starts tripping through a dam, and the more it goes through, the wider the dam, the crack in the dam is. Same way with the walls around our heart. We let the enemy get in one area or one instance in our life. And if we don't repair that wall, if we don't close that gate, it's not long before he comes in a second time and a third time. And after a while, he's bringing some of his buddies with him. And it's not long before the whole city is in shambles and a mess. That's the kind of ruin that's described here. It may be this morning that you have fallen into practices that the Bible says is wrong. You know they're wrong, but for whatever reason, you just have this problem being able to overcome this thing in your life. You can't stop it. The reason you can't stop it is because your defenses are gone. The walls of your city have been broken down. Your gates have been burned. Gates are a way in and a way out. You know, if you just have a wall, we think of walls as keeping things or people out, which is true. But if that's all you have is walls and you don't have any gates, that means you can't get out either. You're a prisoner within your own self. So there's gates so you can go in, so you can go out, so you can allow people in, allow people out of your lives. Maybe this morning to you, or to others rather, you appear to be doing fine. But it's not the outward that matters. Inwardly, you may know that you're not doing fine. You know, you may be able to fool some people. You may be able to fool them for a long time. But you can't fool God, obviously, and you really can't fool yourself. You know when things aren't like they should be. You know when they're not right. So how do you handle that question, is the question. We have to rebuild the walls around our hearts so that the enemy cannot invade us. We have to stand, watch, and be ready to fight the attacks of the enemy. In the 4th verse here, it says, when I heard these things, this Nehemiah, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before the God of heaven. Nehemiah has a deep sense of personal concern here. He's willing to face the facts, to weep over them, and then tell God about them. You know, there's always a place to begin. And this is the place to begin. What's needed is honest facing of the facts, the ruin, if you will, whatever it is. And when we face the facts, that means we're not blaming somebody else. You know, it's hard to find somebody today that'll say, I messed up. It's my fault. Usually what you hear is, yeah, so-and-so made me, or if it hadn't been for so-and-so, it's always blaming someone else. You don't have to get everybody involved. Face the facts, pour it out before God. Tell Him all of the hurt, all the fear, and all the pain. So then Nehemiah does that, and he starts to pray, and he asks for the grace, and he asks for the strength to carry out the steps that are necessary to begin recovery here. Whatever the ruin in our life is, whatever may be going on in your life today, there's always a place where you can begin and where you must begin. It may be that you need to apologize to someone. You know, that's one of the hardest things in the world to do for whatever reason. We have a hard time going up to somebody and saying, please forgive me, I wronged you. Maybe that's what we need to do this day. Maybe we need to apologize. Maybe we need to go to somebody and get something straightened out between the two of you. We need to stop practicing whatever it is that's wrong. We need to seek advice. We need to seek counsel maybe. There's always a first step, and that's where you have to begin. So Nehemiah prayed for help in the opening chapter of this book. And then there's a lapse of about 4 months between chapter 1 and chapter 2. 4 months has gone on. Now, we're not told why Nehemiah delayed in bringing his problem to the king, which he eventually did. We can only assume that's because he was